Welcome back to Hot Off the List. I'm Mr. Jonathan, and I'm here with Miss Michelle and our special guest. Jennifer Longo is a novelist, playwright, dog lover, and podcaster whose books include 6 Feet Over It and Up to This Point. Today, we're talking about What I Carry, her latest novel, which tells the story of Muriel, a teenager who is about to age out of the foster care system. All she has to do is make it to her 18th birthday without getting in trouble or forming attachments. But when she moves to a remote island in the Puget Sound, she finds friends and enemies who complicate her plan and force her to reconsider her policy of flying solo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jonathan and Michelle. This is amazing. And I wish I'd had you written the jacket flap copy. That was amazing.
Very good.
Oh, that sounds like a book I'd like to read.
So we asked to interview today because your book is on this year's Florida Teens Read list. And
amazing.
So tell us what that's like when you find out that your book is on the list.
I got this email dropped into my inbox, and we spoke briefly about this before. My hands were shaking. I got a little sweaty. I'm not gonna lie. And I emailed. Sometimes it's weird in publishing. Your agent or your editor might find out something and tell you, or sometimes, like a committee, you guys will directly contact the author, and then I tell them. And I'm typing this group email, and it's full of typos. And I was like, "You guys, Florida, I've never even been there. Oh my God, all these kids are reading, and the media people. And can I call you? They're busy. It's a 3-hour time difference. They're not gonna call me." They're like, "Girl, it's fine." I had to calm down and breathe. Just when it's the readers and the students choosing the books, and the teachers and the librarians and the people involved and teaching and interacting with kids every day, that is the biggest honor. There's nothing better that can. This is amazing. It's weird and it's crazy, and I'm over the moon.
Well, again, thank you. We're just so excited to talk to you about What I Carry. So tell us what led to this book. Like, how did this get started?
My husband and I met our daughter. She was in foster care, and we fostered her for a couple of years and then adopted her when she was very young. She was 3. And as she grew up, every kid, and people say this a lot, and we're saying it more these days, which is wonderful. Every kid wants to see themselves. Every person wants to see themselves in a story. That's why we read. We want to see ourselves and our lives reflected. And as we get older, books are the best tool for talking to kids and, learning about things and explaining hard conversations. Foster care is not an easy conversation about your origins and where you come from and who your real parents are and who your forever parents are. There just weren't. And so, long story long, there weren't a lot of books, certainly not picture books. There's no board books. My new foster home. What? Can we have a lift the flat book with a suitcase? Like, maybe I need to write that. And so when she would have, friends and kids in school, and they'd do the family tree project, and it's always hard she would come home and go, do parents not tell their kids that there's other kinds of families? Why doesn't anyone know about this? And not that we wanted to write an instructional manual. So anyway, so as we got older, we didn't find any. And there are some beautiful books about kids in foster care. 99% of the time, they're not written. And ironically, I'm not a person from foster care, but they're not written by a kid who's lived in foster care or who has edged out, or even by someone who's had any connection to it. There was a book a couple of years ago that's a beautiful book, and it got the biggest awards you can. And the author was like, "I have no connection. I just thought it would be dramatic and nice." And I'm like, okay, can we have some stories? And that's maybe why. And my daughter finally, was asking me, can you just write something that's just a life, that's another life, a kid that happens to be in foster care, and maybe kind of get that message out that it's not about, a kid is bad, or there's not always a house being burned down. Not everyone's being molested. There's 500,000 kids in foster care in this country. There's 500,000 different stories, and this is just one. And I'm very honored and proud that it could be added to the canon of literature about kids living this different life.
Was she your first reader?
She was, yeah. And she was a great beta reader. And now, thank goodness, publishing companies are employing, I like to refer to them as accuracy readers, which ironically, I wish we didn't have to. If people could get publishing contracts to write from our own experiences, you wouldn't need accuracy readers. I mean, it's always good if you have a side character, there's always things we're going to write about that we're not that's a whole other conversation. But I had accuracy readers for a lot of the different aspects of it. She was my first one, and that's been the best and most. Again, I'm so honored and grateful that a lot of the feedback I'm getting from kids, and I spoke only to kids in care or aging out, like a dozen different kids. A lot of feedback I've gotten is that it's pretty realistic. There's some great things that they're glad are out there. It's good stuff. It's stuff I experienced and my daughter experienced, and it's good so far. Yeah.
I think it adds a necessary voice to the canon of literature. So I appreciate that. And I wanted to ask,
Nice, thanks.
what do you wish that kids could
Mhm.
understand about the foster care system? Like, if they don't know anybody who's in the foster care system, what is something that they might be surprised to learn, or something that would help them understand the experience better?
That's my favorite question. And I will say that it's something that I wish that kids and adults would know and understand. Because in fact, the impetus, really the moment that the rubber hit the road to start writing when my daughter asked me, was a beloved family member that I had. We were having brunch once. We were talking about a family that we knew who had adopted or had fostered a teenaged girl and then adopted her. And she was having a hard time adjusting because, gee, I wonder why. She'd spent 14 years in a really dicey situation, had never been away from her parents, was reacting badly. And this person in our family said, oh, that kid's problem is she's just not grateful. She just doesn't know how good she has it. And I was about to flip the table, but there were scones and muffins, and I wasn't going to sacrifice those. However, I just turned around and wrote a book. So what I hope is conveyed along with just a fun story to read is that it is never, ever the child's fault for being in foster care. Never, ever, ever. I can say it again, ever. If you know a kid who's in foster care, it is because the adults in their life, whether it's their parents, whether it's the government making member, whether it's the legislature, whether it's people in CPS, there were decisions made by the adults that this child needed care. This is not a bad person. Everyone's born the same way. We all come out of a lady's body one way or another. There's nothing inherently different about a kid in foster care. It's another thing maybe is it's really great to be curious, but it's really not your business if somebody doesn't want to share their story. But it's kind to be curious and ask in respectful ways, and maybe someone will be interested. But I think that really is the crux of it. This is nothing that a kid did. And this isn't a thing where I hear people say, threatening, oh, I'm going to send you to foster care. That's not how it works. That's called abandonment. And that's illegal. Like yeah. So the children are either their parents have died. There's a reason. It is not their fault. And, there can be a lot of placements. There can be a few. And it's a childhood and a life like anyone else's. Everyone's got different things. And that's one of the different things. And they can always use a friend and some comfort.
Thank you for sharing.
It's a traumatic thing. Thanks. Yeah. It's rough. It's so hard when people that we love have these misconceptions and you think, you are 70 years old. Where did you get this? And when people, when parents don't know this and adults don't know this and they tell their kids that, and you'll be in a neighborhood, and if there's a foster family who has kids in foster care coming to live with them, the other people in the neighborhood will say, you can't go over there to play. You stay away from those kids. And it's like, oh boy. Okay. Well, now we're making it worse.
Yeah, that's
Dude,
terrible.
it's a nightmare. Yeah.
And that's why books like this are important, so that, you can get rid of these myths that surround people who have a different life than maybe you would have experienced.
Yeah. And it's hard to get that. We edited a lot out where you don't want to sound preachy, and you don't want to sound like it's the whole show don't tell,
Right.
Here's the after school special where this stuff, but and again, this is just one story. This isn't how foster care is for everyone. This kid is a lot of privilege and a lot of luck, but also a lot of crap. Again, 500,000 kids, 500,000 different stories.
Right.
And that is when I was reading it, it wasn't a perspective that I had. And so I think that's one of the reasons I loved reading it so much. We read, as Christopher Crutcher says, we read to know we're not alone. We read to know that other people feel the same way that we feel. But also, the research shows that the more fiction kids read, the more compassionate they become. because they're reading other people's stories. And so if kids can become compassionate by the things that they're reading, we're moving ahead every day like we want to be.
I think you're right.
So thank you.
Thanks. And the more perspectives that are in there, it's good, because there's always the blame game. CPS wants to blame the parents want to blame the legislature wants to blame the parents, everybody wants to blame the foster parents and the workers, and like, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the kids. So can we all not get our crap together and focus on what's right? And there's a lot of, oh boy, yeah, it's rough. And the kids get the blame.
Speaking of a variety of perspectives, Muriel has worked a lot of jobs, and I'm wondering, have you also had that experience?
I have. I think a lot of Gen X kids worked a lot of jobs. My first job was working in, my parents owned the town cemetery, and so I worked in there picking up rocks among the headstones so that the mower didn't get dinged. Good times. I worked at a radio station doing traffic and weather on the AM station when I was in community college. I worked at Wet Seal in the mall. I worked at bookshops. I was a barista for years. It's, the jobs you have when you're in college and high school, and they're all real fun. But I think that first one, working in the cemetery, it's always, that's a crazy thing, right, for a kid to do. And my dad was kind of a cheapskate, I'm just going to say it. So he liked to hire family and people unqualified for positions. Like when I was, 16 or 17, and for the summer I had to be in the office because he didn't want to hire a secretary. So I'm selling graves to people. And I wrote my first book kind of based on that. Just like, what? I don't think anybody needs to come into a cemetery office and get a grave sold to them by some kid in a Purple Rain t-shirt. Like, that's just stupid. It was dumb. And then the day that someone came in, because one of the parents from my high school came in and their kid had died in a drunk driving accident. And I sold them a grave, and I was like, sir, this is the end of my career as the grave seller. Like, we're not doing this anymore. So dumb.
Yeah.
So dumb.
So one of the things that that Muriel does in the story is that she carries something from lots of the places that she's been, hence the title, What I Carry. We want to know what you would carry on your way. What would you pack? What would you carry with you?
If I was going like from house to house like that? Oh man, you know what? Probably earbuds. What do you call those things when you don't want to hear stuff? Not the buds, but the
the sound canceling ones.
The sound things. I have real bad misophonia, girl. It's not good. And I'm really sensitive to sound, and I would have to. But if I were taking little souvenirs from houses, a lot of that was from kids that I spoke to who had aged out of care, but a lot of them, I liked the idea of taking, like the Allen wrench. Oh, an Allen wrench is a tool that you can use everywhere. I would probably steer clear of sentimental things, but yeah, useful things. Like I would need earbuds and something that I'd learned from each house. If I learned how to floss in one house, maybe take the floss. I don't know. I think things like that are very, a blanket.
Well, it also leads to the question of Muriel is very specific in what she packs. She packs light.
Yeah.
Many of us don't have that skill. We haven't had to have that skill, but we also are getting better at that skill because when we travel, it costs a lot of money to bring your bag. And so
you just want to bring a carry-on. Don't check that bag. They're charging you $50.
But they're so small. So is there something that you always pack? Like what's in your I have to go right now case?
Oh.
I got to pick up and go.
Running shoes. And it takes up so much room, but that's with like the ear thing. If I don't run or walk every day, I'm a monster. As long as I have that, because you can't run in sandals and you can't run in flip-flops and you can't run in clogs or high heels. If I have a good pair of running shoes, I'm okay. Then you can buy the rest of the stuff when you get there. But no one wants to go to a different country or a different place where the running shoes are real expensive too. Oh man, you're making me get panicked about. I moved so much when I was little. I realized I'd moved 21 times. we were real poor when I was little, and we kept getting kicked out of our rentals, or people would serve us summons, or they would give us eviction notices. And my parents got to the, it wasn't that bad. I had a fine childhood, but we just had some troubles. And my parents were like, they would send us to the door to get the eviction notice because they thought they'd be nicer about it. They were not nice. It was still an eviction notice.
Well, and I'm sure a lot of that gets channeled into like your work, especially in this book. I'm sure you could probably
Totally.
empathize.
Yeah, and you don't even think about it. I mean, at least I was still with my parents and I knew who I was going with. And we always had the same kind of food and our same stuff with us. But yeah, sometimes when you write and you know, your editor will go, "Why do you keep doing this weird thing where everyone's like in a graveyard moving all the time?" And I'm like, "I don't know." Then you go to therapy and go, "Oh, right. So really books are just this. So thanks for reading my therapy notes. I hope you're not traumatized as I am." Oh my God.
Well, you
And
we've talked about like channeling your life into your writing, and now I'm wondering like channeling like classic books into a current context, because in your book, Muriel has conflicting feelings when she reads Laura Ingalls Wilder.
yeah,
And so I'm wondering, as an author, what is your
yeah.
take on how we appreciate classics that have a troubling history? Like, how do we enjoy them while also putting them in context?
Oh, such a beautiful question. You know, as a white gal, it's embarrassing to say that until my daughter, I mean, you know, you always get to those, as Wendy McLeod, the author of Wilder Life, one of the greatest books ever written, calls them the uh-oh pages with, you know, the blackface and the many, many references to the only good quote Indian is a dead, like I can't even say it, it makes me sick. And even John Muir. John Muir's got some racist crap that the Sierra Club was real good at hiding. And then I wrote this book and went, "Oh, sorry, whoops." Not as bad. It's a whole mess. So my thoughts on this, I think, began when I was reading this to my daughter, right? And my daughter is Asian American. She's Mien American. And we're reading this and she's like, "What would I have been at the, like, if I lived then, would I be having a bonnet and going across the country?" And I thought, no, you'd be down in a mine. You would be a servant. It wouldn't be good. It would not be great. And so I'm also taking classes now to get a certificate for library proficiency because I want to be a librarian. That's my dream. And we're talking about this a couple of weeks ago. And I think obviously, you know, some of these books are beautifully written. I think that Laura Ingalls Wilder, being edited by her daughter Rose, the two of them together made these beautiful books. And yeah, this is how they spoke then, and this is it. What I think that is important to realize is we don't need to traumatize kids repeatedly year after year by reading only these books that have all of this racism and misogyny, and it's these raindrops that fill a bucket. And if girls and Black kids and kids of color and Indigenous students are forced in public schools to have a steady diet of only these white authors and only the stuff that has so much racism and misogyny in it, which basically in most schools they are now, it is 99% that goes in your ear and down your spine, and it's part of you. And that is the message that you're getting. It's white supremacy day after day after day. And we soak it in, it becomes part of us. I think that these books should always be available in the library. I think they don't need to be centered in classroom curriculums anymore at all. We know that there are very many better books written by Black authors, Indigenous authors, women of all BIPOC women, particularly Black women, and that they've never been allowed to be part of the curriculum in a significant way is horrifying. That is censorship. That is promoting white supremacy. But like in these library classes, these books have a place and they're part of it. And we don't need to hold them up as the only book. It's dangerous and it's damaging, and they are, they're part of the canon, but they're not the canon. They're the white male canon. And we have to remember, I think, that the times that the canon, was being built, and it's all these white male authors, that's because who were the editors? Who were the reviewers? Who were the publishers? We talk about wanting a book that we see ourselves in. Of course, they're going to pick the books that these white men saw themselves in. So that's how they get elevated and they get taught year after year, not because they're better, but because they keep being taught. it's habit and it's bad. And oh, disrupt texts. You guys know about that?
Yes.
Isn't that, I mean, who the hell am I talking to? Of course you guys know, Jesus. But I love, and they're the ones who are like, look, and that's the other part of the conversation too. When you do teach these books, you cannot just go, here's To Kill a Mockingbird. Isn't this great? You can't do that without disrupting that text and centering the conversation about what is white saviorism. You know, it's
or
just,
how
it's
are
so
race
infuriating.
relations today different than they were then? Because if we're still teaching racism with a book that was published in the 1950s, that's not doing our kids any service in terms of who they're going to become and what kind of society they want to live in. And so,
and their value as a person.
Absolutely. So what we're trying to do, like, I have to filter myself a little. What's happening a lot in Florida is we're trying to be very careful about pairing our standard texts, our classic texts, with contemporary novels that tell that same time frame in a different way, so that kids are seeing both perspectives. It's so important that we do that, so they recognize that this is where we were and this is where we need to go, or where we're headed.
The contemporary books that are being written now, aren't they just incredible? And there's this idea that, well, it's not old, so it's not, it's written by a Black woman, so it's not, and it just makes me want to, well, flip another table.
I feel like we're similar in age. When I was this age, I was reading like V.C. Andrews' Flowers in the Attic.
Girl,
you know?
Like, that's where we learned about family relations.
Yeah, like there was never any diverse literature. I mean, that was diverse, but not really. I mean, there was just nothing, there weren't as many things that told other people's perspectives. And I remember even when I became a media specialist, I'm taught in the very Latino area, and a lot of my students were from Puerto Rico. It was not impossible, but it was very hard to find books that had been published for middle grade kids that were written by people like them. And I remember the first time I found it, I like almost accosted the author at a conference, and I was like, oh my gosh, you have to come to my school finally. Like somebody that's written something current.
I
know we're
Oh, no. You're fine. Okay. You're fine. I was just going to say, I think we're very lucky to have the group of school librarians we do, who, when they looked at the standards and it was a lot of the classics, they immediately were like, how do I make this connect with my students? And we're talking about different books that they wanted to recommend to go along with them. So I think we're lucky to have a group of really impassioned individuals who also see that and want to provide a solution. So I like that.
It's amazing. And I have to just say right now, I feel creepy being three white people talking about this, but I think we all recognize it, and trying to learn and be better. And I think an important part of that conversation too, that I have heard and talking to the disrupt text people, is that a lot of the classic older books written by women, written by Black women, women of color, Indigenous women, is that they're often, and my daughter's teacher did that this year. We had this whole, they will, because the pairing is good and it's important, but also these books can stand on their own. And a lot of times the books written by non-white authors are put on the special shelf to read when you're done with the real books, or they're only used as a companion piece. And that is not where they belong. They belong to be centered, I think. And the other piece of it too, as a writer, it makes me think, like when I was little, all I read was the same old dead white guys. It was just Thomas Hardy and, all the guys we know. And as a writer, that tells me, as a woman particularly, we never read women. Maybe Jane Austen, maybe if you got a woman teacher. It's like, well, then I can't be a writer, because only real books are written by, and Judy Blume, we had that, and it was just like, oh, but that's just a silly, no, it's not. These are, oh my God, it is so, we never read a Nella Larson book. We never read an Alice Walker book. We never read any of these women, and it's just gross. And then you push back a little, you push back a tiny bit. Again, I'm a white woman. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but I'm learning this. When you push back a little and say, could we have a book written by a Black woman? And you get this massive temper tantrum. How dare you censor us? And that's the thing too, with the books full of racism and misogyny, the old ones, have them in the library. You don't need to make a display of them. And when you even try to replace them with a better book by a Black female author or any Indigenous woman author, anyone, you get this, oh, you're censoring us. You're saying, oh my God, we're not burning your freaking books. No one's burning or banning anything. We're realizing that
But it's okay
Black
to
Americans
expand the
and
conversation. It's okay to expand the
it is.
conversation, you know?
People want books about themselves. This isn't a position. And, we've started this conversation, but publishing is white. Here's the problem. There's not enough Black teachers. There's not enough Black people, Indigenous people, anyone BIPOC in publishing. In 2015, there was this beginning of a push. Oh, we need to, I'll tell you, in 2021, it's not any different. You look at the pie charts and the graphs, it is no different. The gatekeepers are still us three. And it's this thing where we're going to deign to let someone have a seat at the table. Oh my gosh, F that. Burn the table. It's not our table. It never was. So I think that kids have always wanted, kids of color and Black kids and Indigenous kids have always wanted stories about themselves.
Absolutely.
Now it's just that, oh, white people, we're deciding that, oh, we'd like to learn about your life. We'll get some more books. It's, oh my God, it's
a good point.
It's awful. It's really awful. But that's why stuff like Disrupt Text is amazing.
Yes.
If you are required to teach these texts, you can teach them with truth and honesty and know that Ray Bradbury didn't write Fahrenheit 451 because he was talking about censorship. He was just talking about how people of color and women are stupid. I mean, those are his own words. And when you read it we have a lot of work to do, you guys. Oh God, it makes me tired. What are we going to do?
Well, you're doing some of that work.
You're doing the work as an author. You're doing the work as working to be a media librarian.
Well, and also you're doing it as a podcaster because you have a podcast about this exact topic, don't you?
I hope so. I do. And it's more from a parent. And again, I feel like an idiot because here's this white lady, but my daughter is Mien. She's the one that had these experiences. And so together
Well,
so that's where the podcast
I think it's important, like, even as a white person, to be open to having these conversations and open to, like, being quiet and listening to other voices. But I think it's important to contribute. And so your podcast, I can't say the real word because we're talking to high schoolers, but it is Darned Scribbling Women. I'm sure they can figure out what the real podcast is if they enjoyed this conversation and would like to hear your perspective with your daughter when you talk about this. And so on this podcast, can you give us a kind of a brief overview of what the podcast subject is?
Absolutely. In 1855, Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote, Scarlet Letter and all the books you kids have been forced to read over summer, he was having a little slump in his career. And at that time, a few white women were being given book contracts and people were loving it because ladies like to read too. Spoiler alert, were literate and they were selling well. And Nathaniel got really mad and wrote a letter to his editor and was like, you know what? My books would be selling better if it weren't for these darned scribbling women. All right, mediocre white dude, you're going to blame your slumping sales on the fact that women are selling books. So that is where the name of our podcast came from. My daughter, when she started high school, again, as a white privileged person, and now I have this child who is not white, I'm finally, Jesus, for the first, like really noticing, why are all the books you're reading written by white men? Why do you have to read about how women are stupid or they're just, they're only to help the man self-actualize or they're sexually promiscuous and then they're all dead at the end of the book? That is real dumb. And then I realized, oh, gee, you have the same syllabus I have. So when we started pushing back in the school district against this, we got nothing but refusal and another blame game. It's the teacher's fault, it's the administration's fault, it's the parents' fault, it's the principal's fault. And when it came down to it at our school, the teachers were like, they were all men, all white. I don't know what was up with our school, but they had an all white male teaching staff and they said, no, we all have our favorites. We're not willing to give up a single one. Deal with it. And then here's the special shelf of ladies in the corner where when you're done with your 80 hours of homework a week, if you feel like it, you can read a girl. And they're all white women. Okay. So we just got pissed. I was mad and I was freaking out that my daughter was going to be soaked in racism and misogyny every day. And honestly, some of these books are not great. Again, elevated because white men related with them. Hashtag not all white men, Jonathan. I love you. I'm just saying.
That's okay.
A white woman. It's me too. I'm a Karen. I think it's inherent in all of us, and we're trying to be better.
Absolutely. But, and I think you have to realize like the privilege that you bring into a situation and constantly question it. And so, you know, I think that's okay to acknowledge that privilege exists for white men who are authors.
Admit where we come from. And and so here's my daughter sitting there. Okay, well, the woman in this book is a, you know, they call her a whore and then she's murdered. The woman in this book is the nice mom and helping her son become who he is, and then she's in the background and then she's murdered. This lady's the manic. It was, so I was like, look, this is stupid. Are we? And I, you know, I made a list. The district supervisor was like, yeah, girl, can you get, he was a white man. He's like, could you maybe give us a list? Because if we taught books written by women, we're not going to have enough books. And then my head nearly exploded. And I was like, I'm sorry, what now? So he said, and if we do that, if we introduce women authors into the curriculum, we don't have canon vetted, you know, quality books. And I gave him a 4-page list of books written by women in the 18th, 17th, and 19th centuries that had won Newbery, that had won Pulitzer Prize, you know, Orange Prize, Pushcart, all of these Black women, Indigenous women. Like, did you know? Here's news you can use. School supervisor, here's this list. And he was just like, whoa, and nothing came of it. And the poor school librarian had tried for 5 years, and she's like, whatever. So we started this podcast where we took her freshman syllabus, her English syllabus, which is all the dudes you know, and one author for each episode of the podcast. We offer 5 or 6 alternatives of Black, Indigenous, Latinx women, a few white women in there, alternatives who are theme adjacent, time adjacent. You know, and my favorite episode was the Transcendentalist. Oh my God. They teach about all the white guys, the Walt Whitmans and these are the Transcendentalists. And you know what's great about them? They supported abolitionism. Are you ever going to hear about the actual Black people who were the actual abolitionists? Sojourner Truth, you know, Frances Watkins Harper, these women who are the creating democracy, they're the ones actually doing it. But no, you never get to read their writing. You hear about the white men who, because it fit into their narrative, they thought abolitionists were nice, and then they went and talked about it. That doesn't even make sense to me.
Well, on the target of your podcast, we're actually going to play a very similar game if you're ready. We're going to play Might We Suggest. You don't have to be scared. It's the same format as our other games, Michelle. So I'll direct a question to each of you. So we'll start with Jennifer. And then if she is not able to fill in the blank, then you have the chance to steal, and we'll go back and forth. So for Might We Suggest, we are going to name a male authored classic and suggest instead a book written by a woman. Okay. And so you will either be naming the classic that is mentioned or the replacement. All right. Here we go.
Oh my God, I'm scared. I don't even know my own podcast. Oh God.
We'll start with Jen. Okay. Here we go. Under His Eye. Instead of Orwell's 1984, might we suggest this daring dystopian novel by Margaret Atwood?
Oh, the Handmaid's Tale.
Yes, correct. All right. 1 point for Jen. All right.
Now I'm going to get one I don't know.
Here we go.
Okay, I would be remiss. Let me quickly add really quick. There is a conversation about the Handmaid's Tale that story is written by a white woman, and it basically tells the story of what actually happened in America to Black women who were enslaved, but let's make it about a white woman and now it's okay. But at least it's written by a lady. Let's go.
All right, Michelle. In Love with Cuba and the Sea, might we suggest Nina Moreno's novel, Don't Date Rosa Santos? It makes for a fresh alternative to this Hemingway novel about an elderly man trying to catch a fish.
The Old Man in the Sea.
Yes, correct.
Yay!
All right, you're tied 1 for 1. This one is for Jen.
God, okay. I'm excited.
All right. Trouble with Family in School. You could turn to Salinger's Catcher in the Rye, but might we suggest this novel by Sapphire, which was turned into the 2009 movie Precious? All right.
Push.
Yes, correct. All right.
What was it?
Push.
Push.
Oh.
All right. This one's for
I thought
Michelle.
okay. Yes.
If adventure on the seas is your thing, might we suggest Miriam McNamara's The Unbinding of Mary Read? It makes for a much shorter
Ooh.
alternative to this whale of a book by Herman Melville.
Moby Dick.
Yes, correct,
Yeah,
correct.
girl. We got
I'm really
it.
glad I never had to read that one. I'm gonna
All
be
right,
honest.
here we go. Here's
So
Jen's
long. Moby
last
Dick
one.
is my Moby Dick. I'm still trying. Okay.
All right, do flappers make you go zing, old sport? Might we suggest Z, a novel of Zelda Fitzgerald by Therese Ann Fowler, as opposed to this oft-lauded novel about Daisy Buchanan and her eccentric ex?
The Great Gatsby.
Uh,
Again.
yes.
Full of stuff that when my daughter brought it up in class, are we going to talk about the anti-Semitism and the body shaming and the misogyny? And the teacher goes, we don't have time for that, but we're going to move on.
Oh,
Literally.
no.
So yeah,
Oh,
I got it.
All right, Michelle, let's see if you are both going to end up tied. Here we go.
Okay.
Go.
The horror, the horror. Like sinister literature set in Africa, might we suggest Oyinjan Braithwaite's My Sister, the Serial Killer? It makes for a much more entertaining read than this violent and problematic classic written by Joseph Conrad.
I don't know this one.
Jen, would you like to steal?
Yeah, steal it.
Oh, wait, Joseph Conrad. Oh, it's William Golding as Lord of the Flies. I was thinking Lord of the Flies. Crap, Joseph
What
Conrad.
I went with
Ooh,
first too.
what? Oh, it's on the tip of my brain. Joseph Conrad's. Oh, I don't know. I lost it. What is it? Oh, the heart of darkness.
Yes, correct, correct.
Wow.
We did it. Oh, I'm
Very
sorry,
nice.
I got the softballs. Yay!
Well, thank you
Oh my
so
gosh,
much for making time for us, and congratulations
no
on
dog.
winning our game.
Thank you so much. Again, I can't even, this is such an honor. You guys, I cannot wait to come to Florida. I want to go see what's his bucket's cats. Is that Hemingway?
Hemingway.
Oh God. Hemingway's
Yes,
cats. I want
in
to
Key
go there.
West.
It's such a beautiful place, and I hope you guys are staying safe in our summer
Absolutely.
humidity, and
Yep.
oh, what an honor.
And for all of our high schoolers who haven't already read Jennifer Longo's What I Carry, this is a fantastic book. Go to your media
Oh,
center,
Jonathan,
ask your media
thank you.
specialist for it. It really tugs at your heartstrings. You're going to fall in love with this character. If you have a family that doesn't look like your friends' families, or if you have any experience of the foster care system, I think you'll really bond with this book too. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thanks, you guys. It was wonderful talking to you.